At exactly 7 in the morning, outside that house in Maple Heights, Columbus, my suitcase tumbled down the porch steps, snapping one of its wheels. Margaret, my mother-in-law, stood in the doorway, still holding her steaming ceramic mug. She said, "Elena, this house is no longer yours. Your things are in the garage. Take them and leave." I didn't say a word. I just reached into my coat pocket and checked my phone, as if I were checking the time for a client meeting. 11 years. For 11 years, I kept track of every bill in this family, filled out every tax form, and smoothed over every argument. And now, my entire life was in a cardboard box with Elena's things scribbled on it in marker. If you also want to know how the quietest people turn out to be the most dangerous, hit the like button on this video right now, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Storyhaven Daily because this story is just getting started. Adjusting my coat, I walked toward the car. I knew Margaret had absolutely no idea about the mistake she had just made. 11 years ago, when I first joined this family, I quietly molded myself into an unofficial compliance officer without telling anyone. After every Thanksgiving dinner, when Uncle Frank and Margaret would bicker over some old property, I would quietly step in and untangle the numbers. When my husband Daniel's sister Kate couldn't pay her credit card bill, I would silently create a spreadsheet with a month-by-month payment plan, never once bringing it up again. I remember my father-in-law Harold often saying, "Elena, you are the real glue of this house. No one else will give you credit for it, but I know." At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I realize it was a warning. I never stood up for myself because I was taught that keeping the peace was my responsibility. I was the quietest person at every family meeting, sitting there with a notepad, treating every decision like an audit. People thought I was weak. In reality, I was just keeping records. Daniel and I had been married for 9 years, and over time I noticed that his silence had become a habit. When Margaret would dismiss my efforts at the dinner table saying, "Oh, Elena just plays with numbers. It's not a real job," Daniel would just stare at his plate, saying nothing. At first, I thought it was weakness. Later, I realized it was out of convenience. Whenever a decision had to be made in the house, property repairs, tax filings, or Harold's medical bills, he would call me in, and then later take all the credit himself. Gradually, I was even phased out of the family photos. Last year's Christmas card didn't even have my name on it. It just read, "Daniel and Family." I never complained. Instead, I started paying closer attention to Harold's files, noting down every document, every signature, every date. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but my fingers habitually scanned every piece of paper, like an auditor sniffing out danger before it even surfaces. 3 months after Harold's death, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment in Dayton, the same old expanding file folder spread across the table that I had quietly slipped away with when I left the house. It was from Harold's private filing cabinet, tax returns, property deeds, and an old general power of attorney document signed in 2018. Out of old habit, I started reading it line by line, like a client file. In the notary section, the stamp's expiration date was 2017, a year before the signing, and there was only one signature on the witness line, where 2 were legally required. Under the Ohio Revised Code, this document was legally null and void. Margaret and Kate were preparing to sell the entire property relying on this very piece of paper. If you have ever stayed so quiet in a relationship that people mistook your strength for weakness, let us know in the comments. Have you ever made such silent sacrifices for your family that no one even noticed? We want to read your stories on Storyhaven Daily. I closed the folder, and for the first time, a faint smile crossed my face. I remembered that afternoon in the summer of 2020, when Harold had called me into his study without telling Daniel or Margaret. He pulled a manila envelope from the bottom drawer of his desk, bearing the letterhead of the First Columbus Trust Company. He said, Elena, you are the only one in this family who doesn't let the numbers lie. This is my private trust account. I think everyone else has forgotten it even exists. I've made you the secondary account holder, just for emergency access. Don't tell anyone. Not yet. At the time, I chalked it up to Harold's usual caution, an old man's habit. But sitting there rereading that paper, I realized it wasn't caution. It was a decision. Harold knew exactly how Margaret and Kate handled money, impulsively, without thinking. He didn't pick me because I was the family favorite. He picked me because I was the only one who paid attention to every single detail. Exactly 42 days after Harold's passing, Margaret and Kate started the process of selling the property without involving an estate attorney. They were in a rush because Kate's husband's business was going under, and they needed cash. They submitted that same old power of attorney document to the Franklin County Recorder's office, assuming it gave them the authority to transfer the property. Margaret appointed herself the informal executor of the estate without filing anything in probate court. I found all this out because the county recorder's website is public, and I routinely checked it once a week, just like an auditor doing a routine review. When I saw the document number and the filing timestamp at 5:39 p.m., I knew exactly how rushed they were. No lawyer works in such a frantic hurry. That was all I needed. I opened the Ohio Probate Court's website on my laptop and began drafting a formal objection, quietly, without telling a soul, exactly the way I had always done things. I filed a formal motion in the Franklin County Probate Court to place a stay on the title transfer, attaching that old, unexpired notary commission list I had downloaded from the Ohio Secretary of State's public database. It was enough to prove that the notary who stamped it in 2018 had their commission expire a full year prior. The court clerk called me back. A case number was assigned on the morning of October 20th, with a hearing date set for 3 weeks later. I knew Margaret had no clue yet. She was still having the house cleaned, calling real estate agents, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. If you feel like this story is about to take a real turn, hit the like button, because the next part is exactly what you've been waiting for. Stay tuned to Story Haven Daily, because what's about to unfold shook the entire family to its core. I put my phone on silent and decided to wait it out for 3 weeks. On the day of the hearing, at 9:15 a.m. in courtroom number 3, Margaret and Kate both sat in sheer shock as the judge declared the document invalid. The judge stated clearly, "This power of attorney is not valid under Section 147 of the Ohio Revised Code, and therefore any property transfer executed under it is considered null and void." The judge then read a letter from the First Columbus Trust Company, which I had requested in advance. The letter stated that Harold's private trust account, valued at over $380,000, had been registered in my name as the secondary beneficiary since 2020, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the estate probate. Margaret's face turned completely pale. Kate whispered, "When did this happen?" I didn't answer. I simply closed my folder, as if I were getting up from a routine meeting. Driving back home, I realized that the real secret was yet to come, the one Harold had hidden even from me. 3 days after the court hearing, a trust officer from the First Columbus Trust Company, Susan Miller, called me at 6:50 p.m. She said, "Mrs. Kowalski, we received an amendment that was filed in 2022, just 4 months before Harold passed away." I had no idea such an amendment existed. The next morning, I went to her office and she showed me a document with a handwritten note from Harold attached to it. It read, "Elena, if you are reading this, it means you did what you always do, paid attention, and found the truth. This house is in your name. I already transferred the deed into the trust without telling Margaret." My hands began to tremble slightly for the first time in months. This inheritance wasn't just about money. It was a final, silent acknowledgement from Harold that he had truly seen me, when everyone else had looked the other way. Margaret and Kate had to vacate the house within 21 days, by order of the probate court. The day I returned to the Maple Heights house, the keys were in my hand, and Margaret was standing on the porch in the exact same spot where she had thrown my suitcase 3 months earlier. She tried to say something, her lips moved, but no sound came out. I just said, "Papers always tell the truth, Margaret. It's just that no one takes the time to read them." Daniel tried to talk to me, saying he had no idea why his father did that. I told him, Harold knew that I was the only one in this family who never lied, to the numbers or to myself. I had already filed the divorce papers. If you watched this journey all the way to the end, write "Peace is a rent" in the comments, so we know you grasped the real lesson here. Don't forget to subscribe to Story Haven Daily, because the next story will be even deeper. Today, I sit in that same study where Harold first put his trust in me, and I know that keeping the peace isn't truly peace, it's just a rent, and I have finally settled my account.